Okay, it's nearly 2 minutes past. I think we'll get going. Okay, a huge thank you to everybody who was registered and obviously attending this afternoon. I do hope the next 45 minutes will prove helpful to you and your businesses. An absolutely huge thank you to Mr. Peter Knight for agreeing to attend this afternoon. I'm delighted Peter's here, and I'm looking forward to posing the questions. How are you today, Peter? Are you well?
Excellent, thank you, David, and thank you very much indeed for having me here today. It's really good of you to put on all these helpful tutorials and webinars and things, and a pleasure to contribute, and well done you guys for organising it all.
Thank you ever so much. That's lovely. Okay, so just in keeping with the normal webinars, again, if you've been on these before, you'll probably know what's about to come. Just some house rules and questions. All webinar attendees are muted just to avoid any background noise or any distractions like barking dogs and the kids, and of course the other half. Please use the questions option on the GoToWebinar control panel. I will try and answer all questions at the end of the presentation, but if you do want an answer at the end, don't click on leave your webinar, because I won't be able to answer your question and you'll think I'm awfully rude in not answering your question. You may need to click on the orange expand button at the top of the GoToWebinar control panel to open the questions option. I know a couple of you have already worked out, so that's great news. So today's agenda. Okay, so we'll be around 45 minutes. We've got the Q&A with the fantastic Peter Knight, aforementioned. We're then going to take 2 or 3 of your questions from the room. So again, do please feel free to post the questions as we go. I will be picking these up, and obviously I will post a couple of them to Peter. And then exclusively, we've got a preview of a Brief Your Market new product, by the way, called Virtue. I'm going to look at some preview screens of that just to whet the appetite. And then we've got one of the usual poll questions there as well. So that's the agenda for today. So we're looking around 40 to 45 minutes. Okay, this gentleman needs absolutely no introduction from me. I'm sure all of you guys that are on the webinar know who he is. I've followed Peter in my time in working in property. I've been to the old Sunday Times Awards, of course, and now the extremely successful EA Masters and Best Estate Agent Guide. Peter, a massive thank you again for getting involved today. And we'll kick off with the questions. I hope they're not too tough today. I'm sure there won't be. But again, we're all looking for guidance at this time. It's a very unprecedented period in all of our lives, I think. So the first question, what do you think will be the biggest single challenge agents will face when the government lifts the lockdown and offices will be able to reopen for business? Again, the rumour at lunchtime today, the NAEA, sorry, yeah, easy for me to say, the NAEA is obviously predicting that could be 3 weeks' time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I actually think the biggest issue is going to be managing the surge. I'm in the optimistic camp, and I base my view on all sorts of evidence that we're seeing from around the country. There's a significant upturn in terms of the numbers of inquiries, visits to websites, Rightmove traffic. I've heard from several providers, suppliers, that they're seeing an increase in viewings and so on. From an estate agent's perspective, our members are reporting that they're seeing a significant increase in the numbers of inquiries. So I think one of the key issues is going to be how to manage this, whilst at the same time, of course, managing the pipelines that have been effectively frozen for a period, with everybody wanting to get on with it and making the move. So I think one of the biggest challenge is going to be in the immediate term after lockdown is how to cope with all of these different demands whilst still having to be very mindful of the circumstances in terms of how people, what you can and can't do. And I just saw this morning there's various announcements about what is likely to be the protocols. And I think, again, a big challenge for agents is going to be to make sure that not only they, but of course also their clients understand what is required and to manage that process. So I think as soon as we're open for business again, boom, I think it's going to surge, and I think we're going to have a real nice problem to have in terms of a massive demand.
Absolutely. So I mean, on that as well as an extension on the question there, the agents you speak with, Peter, What are they thinking about the unfurloughing the staff? I mean, a lot of the agents I've certainly spoken with, they furloughed 80, sometimes 90% of their sales staff. Are they thinking about pulling them back in maybe in 3 weeks' time?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got members who furloughed no one, and we have others who furloughed quite a large number. I'd say a significant percentage of those that did furlough people have actually unfurloughed quite a lot of those people now. You know, they're seeing that they need to have additional people in place to cope with this situation. Some might say brutally, I'm strongly recommending that anybody they don't want back into their business is not unfurloughed. I think it's a time to be able to take action as far as the longer term future is concerned. But for the good people, the ones that you want to keep and the ones that you want to bring back in, I think some agents are now saying this is the time. And look, business is being done at the moment. You know, there's been a myth that everything is completely stopped. It hasn't. I'm getting reports from a lot of our members that they've never been so busy, albeit with sort of amounts of staff to cope with the surge, but they're absolutely inundated with inquiries and issues to deal with and manage and opportunities. You know, I had one member just last week, a single office business, listed 27 new properties for rental. One office, 1 week.
Wow.
I know, and another office in the north of England, a part of a bigger network of 8 branches. One person listed 8 properties in a single day. So you know, the idea that there's no business to be had at the moment is just ridiculous. There is business to be had. You've just got to, of course, make sure that you're dealing with it appropriately and in a sensible way. But there's business there, definitely, David.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So there's quite a lot of text on the screen here for you guys at home, so I apologise for this. So there is a growing nervousness in the UK. My mother's one of these. People would like to extend the lockdown. It may basically remain in place for many weeks. People are scared still to go out. So if agents are going to be part of the early, what Boris will call phase 2, reopening their business, do you think it could have a negative impact on our industry? I say that only because I'm sure you guys saw it as well. I know the likes of Pi and EA today and Negotiator picked up on this. But the Daily Mail picked up on an agent in Weston-super-Mare who was doing viewing. It obviously puts our industry in a very, very bad light. I know David Cox on a webinar he did last week was talking about an agent that got prosecuted too. So I mean, on that piece, do you think that because our industry could go back early, that sorry, I've just gone one step ahead there. Do you think that could have a negative impact potentially?
Not if it's done properly, David. I mean, I think common sense has got to prevail, and if in doubt, err on the side of caution, and take all the precautions. And I think, one, it needs to be done anyway, but 2, you need to be seen to be doing it. And just this morning, we had a webinar with our members around what needs to happen and what they need to do, and pretty much all the things that were discussed were in the guidelines. But I think a key issue for a lot of agents now is to make sure that they're training their people on how to do it, right? And on how to, I mean, for example, the idea of turning up at a property with a mask already on, estate agents in masks, probably not a great idea. Arriving at the property having already introduced yourself prior, with a Zoom call or some other technology where they can see the face, standing not 2 meters, but maybe 3 meters or so back from the front door, right? Showing yourself and then visibly putting the mask on. Just little things like that, I think, will make a big difference. And my sense is that what we need to be doing now is having video tutorials with our team members, whether they're furloughed or whether they're actually in employment, because my understanding is you can do training during this period. And getting people ready for how to manage that situation. I also think we've got to be really mindful of the communities, because I think how we behave and how we're seen to be behaving, if on the one hand it's all very transactional and very sort of, for us, business generative, then I think that would be wrong. But if we're seen to be doing what a lot of agents are doing, which is helping people who are desperate to move, they've got imminent arrivals, or they've got job-related issues or matrimonials or all the above, all the usual things. I think that's completely appropriate, but we need to be seen to be doing it the right way, and I can't emphasize that too much. So done properly, and I do believe that the majority of agents have taken this thing very seriously. Inevitably, the Daily Mail and others will pick up on the one or two negative situations. So my belief is that the vast majority of agents will do the job properly, and actually, no, our industry will be seen for what it is, a really important enabler during this time. And you know, I just had just a little one on that. I just had a phone call with my mum about half an hour ago. You know, she's in her 80s, and my stepfather's 92. And do you know what? She said to me, she's had a phone call today from the estate agent that sold them the house 3-4 years ago to find out how they are and to offer if he could do some shopping for them if they weren't finding it easy to get out of the shops. I mean, how amazing is that? And that actually was Martin Stubbs, Phillips and Stubbs in Rye, not a member of the Property Academy, but a good friend. And you know, I just thought, you know, thumbs up, Martin. That's a really, really excellent thing to have done.
Superb. As you say, it's an opportunity for our industry to put those really great stories across. You know, we're coming across them week by week. It really is hard work, as you said. You know, it gives us guys the opportunity in our industry to show our humanistic side, and you know, stories like that, you know, Phillips and Sons, that's fantastic. It
is, isn't it? And it's, as you rightly say, David, it's just one example. It's happened to be literally one I've heard today from my mum, you know, 15 minutes ago, half an hour ago. So, you know, so it's really good stuff.
Yeah, super stuff. Okay, so some estate agents, I'm sure, Peter, we've both dealt with it, have taken the wait and see what happens approach and have literally pressed pause on their businesses and stop marketing. What is your opinion on this?
Well, for my members and other forward-thinking estate agents, it's brilliant because there's so much opportunity out there. You know, and again, I think what's going to happen, David, is people are going to come out of this situation, broadly speaking, in 2 or 3 sort of categories. You know, you've got quite frankly, the idiot stroke rogues who are out there doing stupid things. Then you've got a group in the middle who've just decided to give it up and lock down and go into hibernation. And then you've got those who are saying, you know what, actually, as long as we're appropriate and we do things for the right reasons and we genuinely look to seek to help people, because you know, when people are moving, it's not a discretionary thing. They need to. You know, they need to move on with their lives. They've got a life-changing event occurring and they need to move home. And our job is to enable them to move on with their lives, not just to sell their home or let their property for them. So I think it's actually it's been an opportunity for reputations to be built and built hopefully for the right reasons. And there still is that opportunity. So yeah, I mean, those agents that have gone into hibernation, well, you know, I think that was personally, I think that's the wrong approach. And I'm certainly hearing and seeing an awful lot of evidence that there is still a lot of business to be done. It's not the same. It's reduced. It's tough. All the above. But there's still business to be had out there, without question.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, so you held a very informative webinar recently with the economist Roger Martin Fagin. I know a lot of the press picked up on this, on what the impacts of the coronavirus will have on the UK property industry. So for the attendees that were unable to attend that webinar, can you share with broadly what Roger predicted? To be fair, it sounded like pretty good news, really. And again, I'm sure someone like Roger has got a little bit more experience in the economy than someone like myself.
Well, definitely. I mean, I learned a long time ago. If you forecast something, make sure it's for at least 5 years on, because nobody will ever remember then. And but the difference is with Roger. I've known Roger over 20 years, and he's been advising the Property Academy members on matters economic for all the time that we've been in existence. And his track record is extraordinary. He's a behavioural economist, which is very different than the sort of conventional types that advise the Treasury. Although he actually worked in the Treasury, both in this country and in New Zealand, so he's got a pedigree. But he studies people's behaviours. He studies all sorts of things, and he called the last 3 general elections correctly, and the Trump victory. And I remember when he called Trump's victory months before. Everyone said, "No, you're wrong there, Rod. You're wrong." He said, "No, I'm right." He said, "I'm right. I've just come back from the States." He said, "The trouble is," he said, "the media only is reporting what the if you like, the intellectual groups are saying. They're not reporting on actually what real people are saying." So I buy into Roger. Excuse me. That's not to say he's perfect. Not to say he's 100% right, but he's broadly right most of the time. And what he's saying is basically this: there's no question we're in a very, very deep downwards movement from a GDP perspective and all things economic. I mean, everyone knows that. And we're feeling it, really hard. So, certain industries, even more than ours, I have to say. Travel industry, for example. I mean, it just absolutely just completely gone. But what he reckons is it's going to be a pretty sharp return and recovery. And he reckons that what's going to happen post-lockdown is that people are going to go out spending again. And for all the examples of people who have lost their jobs, and every one of them it's really sad. And of course, even worse, people have not survived this situation. So sometimes when you're talking numbers and things, it can come across as being very impersonal and insensitive. And I really do not mean it to be. It's properly awful. However, for those who get through it, the vast majority of people are either still in jobs or they've been furloughed. And if they're still in jobs receiving full pay or even furloughed on 80%, they can't spend it. I'm speaking to a whole load of people who are saying to me of a certain age demographic, younger people, saying they've never had so much money in their current accounts because they can't go out and spend it. And Roger is of the opinion, and I'm taking his stance, that we're going to see a steep upward curve. He reckons Q4, and he makes the point that a lot of the economic forecasts, what's happening is a journalist will take a quarter and then multiply it by 4 and say, right, we've gone down 3%, therefore let's multiply that up. It's going to be 18%. Well, they're going to just basically 12%, 18, all these different figures. No, he's saying that's not the case. So he reckons that we are going to see a steep upward movement pretty much post the full lockdown. He reckons looking at the end of the summer, realistically, beginning middle of the summer before that really happens. So it's the last quarter. And he reckons that for 2021, we're going to be in for a really, really buoyant period. So much so that he thinks that the biggest issues are going to be staffing issues, supply chain issues, and just coping with the demand issues that are out there. So, look, as I say, he has been wrong on occasion, but in the 20-something years that I've known him, he's been broadly right. So I was cheered, and a lot of other people who saw that webinar came back to me afterwards and went, "Oh, that's the best news we've had in a long time." So.
Yeah, that's great to hear. As you say, it's obviously we all keep our fingers crossed that is the case. As you say, it's I think somebody certainly called the Trump victory that many months earlier. I think I'm prone to have a bet now and again. I think Trump was 50-1 at one point. I think about a month before the it's probably a good man to be in contact with there, Peter. Okay, so what one piece of advice would you give to an agent today? Based on what you've picked up from your network of agents, so what one piece of advice would that be?
I think the key thing is a question, in fact, that Roger asked was, what's the one thing that you would have wished that you would have done during lockdown when we come out of it? And I think that was a really great question to ask. I've taken this, David, as 4 stages. Okay, stage 1 is what I call confront the brutal reality, and hopefully all your viewers and all of your clients and our members will have done that. And that, of course, you have to do that first. You've just got to deal with that brutal reality. The second stage, though, is what I call the reimagine stage. And that's where you can reimagine your business, because we're not going to go back to old normal. We're going to go back to what is going to become a new normal. What's that going to look like? And how do we make our businesses relevant for that new normal? And for some businesses, it might be a tweak here and an adjustment there. Others, it might be root and branch change, and it will depend on where they were prior to. And the question I think to ask yourself is, if not now, when? If you're not going to make a substantial change to your business now, well, when would you make a substantial change to your business? So I think this is a reimagine phase. So phase 3 is the planning and preparation, which is what we've moved into. Albeit, I'm trying to keep our members to have at least 1 foot in phase 2 as well. So there's still reimagining. And then phase 4 is action and implementation to actually get out and deliver on it. And in phase 4, you can break that into 2 parts, I think. The first part is the immediate after lockdown is eased. But we're still in the COVID-19 era. So we're not going to be, that's not the new normal. That's going to be a weird period of time that we're going to need to manage. I've no idea, no one does, how long that will last for. It could be several weeks, might even be months. We just don't know. And that's, but then there will be a period post COVID-19 or post finding a vaccine and so on, where we move into the new normal. And I think so much of what has happened during this time is going to become more and more normal for people to do things like this. Communicating in this way. This has become for me. This is what I do all day long at the moment. And I'm sure we're going to be doing a lot more technology-based communications and interactions and so on with people. So, I think the key thing is to make sure you're spending time currently, yes, managing the brutal reality of the circumstances, but also reimagining your business and making sure that it's relevant for the new normal. And the new normal, the consumer is without question, by every single assessment report that you read, in the new normal, the consumer will be behaving differently to how they behave now.
Yeah, awesome stuff. It was funny, actually, I was watching some television on Sunday night. I was talking to our CEO, Damon, about this, and I said, there were 3 adverts in a row, and they all, like the adverts with all the Zoom. It is becoming that new normal. I mean, even like my parents, they're a lot older, of course, and, they're getting to grips with FaceTime and Zoom and what else. This, as you say, Peter, will become the new norm, but not just for that millennial generation. This is going to become for everybody, isn't it?
Well, it's going to be a fantastic opportunity, I think, for agents to rethink some of their business practices. You take something as simple as, say, as viewings. Okay, now viewings are actually really expensive, and it used to be back in the day when I was on the front line, we used to push for viewings. And that was because we didn't have the facilities that are available today. We had one photograph on a set of property particulars, and that was it. Black and white, by the way, as well. It didn't show the property off. So the key was you need to go and see it. You need to go and see it. You need to go and see it. And then, into the 80s, the idea was list as much as you possibly can, and you get someone to view one property. Can you turn the one viewing into 3 viewings? And that's what we did. Now, though, I think we've got to rethink this. And by the way, I think the consumer will want us to. And therefore, I'm seeing the initial viewing will be probably a virtual viewing for an awful lot of properties. And I think we make it an event. And I think we will turn around and say, really excited that 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, we're going to be launching 32 Acacia Avenue. And perhaps using that as the way to showcase a property first, and then to have physical viewings once people have actually seen it virtually, to make sure that it's appropriate for them and we're not wasting their time, the owner's time, or our time. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out of this period, and of course that's going to require people to be retrained, because actually speaking to camera is very different than face to face. And also presenting to camera is different than walking somebody around a property. So some people are going to get really good at it. And again, this is a great opportunity to practice this. You can have people in their own homes at the moment going around with a phone and actually practicing how they would present their property. I mean, they might have to tidy it up first and make the bed and stuff, and think they haven't done it for several weeks. But it could be a great way, I think, to use this time productively to develop these new techniques and so on. So, I think the lockdown period, of course, it's awful. No one would have wanted it. But are there things that come out of it that will have a fundamental, lasting impact on not just us, but on life? Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I think I saw an advert about a car advert again. You could virtually test drive a car. I mean, whatever next. Okay, next question. So, finances, people will of course be devastated across the whole of the UK, resulting in missed mortgage payments, unpaid rents, general financial hardship, of course, because of unemployment. Do you think the sales market in particular will take months or even years to recover, or do you think we can bounce back within weeks as an industry?
I'm not going to put a timetable on it, but I don't think we are in the awful financial state that people describe. Some businesses are, of course, some people are, of course, but an awful lot of people aren't. So we tend to focus, the media does, on the negatives, not the positives. As Roger alluded to, there's an awful lot of people who are actually better off at the moment. They've deferred their mortgage for 3 months. They've got nothing to spend their money on. They're still earning 80% or more of what they would have been taking home. The government has bailed out, put in a huge amount of money into the economy. So I'm not going to make a time prediction, but I think that we will see a sharp recovery of activity. Prices, there are those out there talking the market down. Well, all the evidence that I see from our members is their pipelines have held up. Okay, people have not pulled out. In fact, I would suggest that in many locations, actually the fall-through rate at the moment is lower than it would have been normally. So that
Wow.
suggests that people are actually saying, no, I'll stick with this deal, and therefore I'll stick with this price. Now, of course, again, the doom mongers will say, oh, wait until it's open and then we'll see. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I think the evidence at the moment is sufficient for me to feel confident that actually prices in a lot of the areas of the country will hold up, transactions will go through, and then start building the pipelines again. You know, of course, what we've got to manage, particularly the sales businesses, parts of our businesses, is we've just got to manage the fact that we're going to have this gap, you know, again, and this is why we need to make sure that not only ourselves, but also that we've got the right conveyancing partners and the right financial services partners and others to ensure that we can get things speeded through. And again, it's a great time to get potential sellers legally prepared and financially prepared as best as they are able to. Because actually there are conveyancers sitting there with not a lot to do. There's financial services people sitting there with not a lot to do. So can we work collaboratively to get our sellers in a position where they're ready to go? And even if that trims 2, 3 or 4 weeks off the process, that's 2, 3 or 4 weeks where your cash flows start to improve. And that's what we've got to, I think, start looking at now. So the moment is now for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Okay. It is expected, and again, I watched the good Lord David Cox webinar last week. Very, very interesting, by the way. Peter, I know you're doing a webinar with Good Lord as well. If you go to the Property Academy website, you can register for Peter's webinar on that. I'll certainly be doing that myself. It's expected the lettings market will immediately bounce back into life as soon as lockdown is lifted. Do you think lettings will actually be ready, though?
Well, I think it's already there. I don't think it stops. I mean, lettings is still continuing. Again, okay, in some respect, I mean, the renewals piece is huge. The amount of people who are renewing their tenancies as a consequence of the situation and needing to. And the smart agents have been selling rent protection and income protection insurances. They've also been having conversations with their landlords about the properties that have become vacant, and having conversations around refurbishing those properties and getting them into better condition in terms of bringing them back to the market. So there's an awful lot that the good lettings agents are already doing. So my concern, back to the very first question, is if too many people have been furloughed and not enough are brought back quickly, and if indeed people have been lost from the industry, and if indeed you don't actually want to bring certain people back because they've demonstrated, quite frankly, they're not the right sort of people to have on board, there could be a shortage. And in that immediate period afterwards, that could be, I think, the big issue that agents are going to face in the short term. A lot of opportunity. And how annoying would it be, to be in a situation where, having had this gap, there's lots of opportunity and you haven't got resources to be able to cope with it. So I do think, we've got to start planning for how do we cope with the spike of activity. But lettings is still very, very active, and I think look, everyone's going to live somewhere, right? Everybody has to live somewhere. So if they're not buying and selling because they're renting, so I think we're okay in that respect. Yeah. Okay.
So tell me the top 3 things you will be proactively doing as an estate agent and excellent preparing. Again, Pete, to be fair, you probably touched a lot on this already anyway. But what would you...
I've got three things I'm currently working on with our members in a big way. The first one is training, right? And I'm not talking about the sort of training I do, and so this is not a pitch for me. I don't do the sort of training I'm talking about. We do business development and leadership development training work. I'm talking about frontline training in nuts and bolts, how to conduct themselves in everyday estate agency, sales and lettings in the COVID era, where they need to be trained properly on that, and it needs to be documented, I think videoed ideally, and make sure that people have properly understood it. That's number one. Secondly, I think communications, and again, we need to make sure that it's always important to communicate. It's probably never been so important, and we need to make sure that we are making customers aware and clients aware that we are able to transact again, but again, making sure they understand the rules of the game and how it's got to be done. We've got to be polite, of course, but we've got to be firm on this and make sure that we're taking proper responsibility. So I think the comms piece is there. And then one of our speakers this morning, David Smith, talked about what he calls PAGs, performance acceleration groups. And I really like this idea of in businesses, putting together teams to look at each aspect of the business and say, how can we improve on that aspect? And a lot of times people think that it's the leadership only that is responsible for strategy or for business improvement. But I tell you what, you get 3 or 4 people together, again, perfect during this period. Perfect, on a Zoom call, every day to have a project. Right, we're going to work on market appraisal. We're going to work on the check-in process. We're going to work on inventories. We're going to work on sales progression. You take each aspect of what we do and ask yourself. And I've got this idea of 3 questions for every part of the process. So you ask: is it positive? Is it neutral? Or is it negative? And if it's negative, can you eliminate it, or can you at least get it up to neutral if you can't eliminate it? So the idea is to think about each stage of the process and each part of it, and what can you do and again, some of the members that we have that we're working with are doing some extraordinary re-engineering of some of their processes to make them really enjoyable as an experience for consumers to go through. So I think that those were the top 3 things: training for the immediate aftermath, great communications to all of your clients and customers, and these performance groups to make sure that you're absolutely analysing every aspect of your business to raise the bar on it.
Yeah, some super advice. Thanks, Peter. So we've touched on it before. I call the V word within Brief Your Market. What is your view on virtual viewings? We've seen many agents up and down the country engage with this. Do you think it's here to stay?
Definitely, yeah. I mentioned already, I think that it's going to be the way of launching properties into the market. I think it's going to be the way to communicate with teams, because we're not going to be able to open up fully. We're still going to have teams working from home, and I think that there will be a lot of consumers that may wish to view virtually to begin with, and we can extend that into the longer term situation. So I'm absolutely of the opinion that virtual viewings will become the new normal, and we will find ourselves doing more of those perhaps than physical viewings. And we'll just get better and better at it, and we didn't need to before. They say necessity is the mother of invention. Well, we now need to be good at it. That will continue, and as a consequence, we will learn and we'll realise that actually it saves, as I mentioned before, everybody a lot of time. And so I'm really excited about it, and I'm seeing that estate agents are going to be becoming performers, or in each business there will be a presenter. There will be somebody who can present exceptionally well. A shout out to Jamie Lester, who I knew when he was running House in Fulham. He's turned himself into a property sort of marketing specialist, and some of his presentations of new homes developments are just, they're worth the watch on their own. He's just so entertaining, and I can see us actually creating locally individuals with big personalities who can present properties really, really well, becoming a sort of a feature of an agency, that we've got this person who has this following and can present in a really excited and helpful but clever way. So yeah, I think this is, we've just scratched the surface of it, and I'm really excited about where this could potentially go to.
Awesome, that's great news. Good stuff. Okay, so could be a rhetorical question, this one, Peter. Do you believe the current crisis has pushed agents into having to engage in new technology just to survive for just the coming few weeks? And again, if it becomes a new norm, just to survive really in the industry?
Okay, so again, I'm working on a thing called CX 4.0. I call it Customer Experience 4.0, and there's been 4 stages of customer experience. The first stage was what I call the store. And basically, people went to the store. If the store had what they wanted, they bought it. If the store didn't have it, they substituted or they did without. And that had loads of iterations. So you had 1.1, 1.2, 1.20, 1.21, all the way up to about 1950, when suddenly 2.0 came in, and that was brands. And that's where brands started. People started to buy based on brands, and brands were associated with themselves. And they started to relate to brands. Now, a lot of estate agents, in my opinion, are still in the 2.0 era. They still think it's their brand that is the key thing to drive business. And by the way, it's still important, but it's not, things have moved on. And again, there were loads of iterations, 2.1, 2.2, 2.9, 2.19, etc., until the year 2000, when basically with the internet, we entered the digital age and transaction. And an awful lot of agents haven't properly embraced it. They've played at it. I mean, some are good, don't get me wrong, but the majority haven't and haven't really. We've actually moved into 4.0. And I think that this COVID-19 and removal out of it has accelerated that still further. And 4.0 is still an excellent brand experience and still an amazing digital experience, but it's also 3 other characteristics. People want things to be not only functional, but they want them to be uplifting. Secondly, they want them to be consistent, but they want them to be individual. And thirdly, they're expecting their provider to have been anticipative, to be proactive in guessing, or not guessing, knowing what they're likely to want. And that's what I think is really important. So in order to deliver on that, you have to design your service proposition. What is it? You know, are you, if you're a burger, you know, are you McDonald's burgers, or are you Byron burgers, or are you a supermarket, Hawksmoor 28 quid a time burger? Simon Whale likes, I'm told. In fact, I think Wendy likes all 3 burgers, but that's a whole nother matter. Anyway, the point is, which market are you in? And then design your service proposition around that. Then here's the big change. Rather than thinking about the people and then the tech, I'm suggesting think about the tech and then the people. So what tech, and not just tech, but what outsourcing in terms of the services could you, not say you will, but could you potentially utilize and then think about the people? Because what we're going to have to do in this industry, if we're going to make a decent profit, is we've got to cost engineer a higher level of service into it, okay? We cannot do that and take on the cost of doing that unless we get smart around how we actually facilitate it. So I'm seeing, regardless of COVID, I'm seeing a massive tech uptick, but it's tech to do the heavy lifting to allow people to do the individuality piece, the uplifting piece, and the anticipative piece, and having the tech there to do the consistency piece behind it, for them. So I just think it's essential going forward that the utilization of tech and then people, but not just tech, as I say, outsourcing of services. The other reason, David, for this, I think it's going to be really important to be nimble. This is a so-called black swan event. And what, we seem to be having them more and more frequently. And if you think of from the year 2000 and you start thinking about the events, 9/11, obviously the global financial meltdown. Now, some of these weren't perhaps global, but you start looking at things like the impacts of the tsunami. You look at impacts in terms of SARS before, the swine flu that we've had. You look at situations like in Japan in terms of the nuclear reactor. You look at the Icelandic volcano and the disruption. Of course, the world has got all sorts of things that happening that causes disruption. And I think one big lesson from this is that we need to come out of it more agile. We need to be able to shift our positions more quickly. We need to pivot in the future into new ways of doing things. So I'm seeing that the tech solutions and the outsourcing solutions will become the first question. And then, what are the essential people? And my sense is we need to upgrade dramatically the quality of many of the people that we have operating in this business. And I'm seeing a real change. Do you know, David, I was paying, back in the late 80s, I was paying managers 75, 80 grand a year, right, in terms of their packages. And you've got people today not earning half that. And I'm not adjusting for inflation, by the way. That's what we're actually paying some of the really great managers at that time. And I just think that, the industry has allowed, because of fee erosion, it means that we've taken on cheaper and cheaper people. We've not been providing them with proper training and proper support. So I think this is a time to change all of that and to remodel it, and to look at how we can enable great tech and great outsourcing, align with some really outstanding people to deliver what I call CX 4.0, this new level of customer experience.
Awesome stuff. No, it's as you say, where we will be in 12 months' time, I'm not Nostradamus, I'm not Mystic Meg. I mean, it's going to be some really genuinely interesting times. So, Peter, obviously, we know you're founder of the guys at the Property Academy. So, what support the Property Academy giving to your member agents? And do you have a final thought today for the audience to take away, just while I have a look at some of the questions that have come in for you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, look, I would say I'd much rather my members answer that question, because what I'm thrilled about is that actually we've increased our membership during this period of time. We haven't been doing hard selling, we've not been doing hard marketing, we didn't think it was appropriate, but we've actually had past members who have returned, who have said, actually we really would like to come back in, and we welcome them with open arms, and we've recruited more new members during this period of time. So, we're delivering probably the equivalent of a month's worth of content each week at the moment. We're doing 2 to 3 webinars every week. We're doing coaching calls with all of our clients. We're doing lots and lots of work with them to enable them to reimagine what their futures are going to be like, as well as coping with the current pressures and demands that are out there. So, yeah, I mean, and I'm seeing some fantastic things. I mean, some of the businesses that we're working with, truly, I'm so excited because they've embraced this. They've dealt with the brutal reality. It's been painful for some of them. It's been painful for us. It's been painful for everyone. But they've dealt with it, and then they've moved into that acceptance phase and said, right, how do we reimagine? So that's the really exciting thing. And I think the key thing is the one big takeaway, I'm going to repeat one of the statements. If not now, when? If this is not a time for you to re-look at your business and all aspects of it, well, then when would you? And I feel that this is actually an opportunity that was. I said years ago. I've said quite a few times actually over the years. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could hit the play button? If you remember the old video recorders, and you had you could hit the pause button, okay, and we could sort everything out. And then when we'd sorted everything out, we take our finger off play and we hit play and fast forward together. If you remember that mode that we used to have. Ask your mum and dad, they'll tell you what it was like. The point is, right, actually somebody did hit the pause button. We didn't want them to actually, but they did. And this has been a period of time where we've had the opportunity, as well as dealing with the reality of the brutal reality, also to look at our businesses and say, right, let's reimagine how they could be. Let's conceive another level of service. And we've still got time, because for all this talk about, oh, we're going to be unlocked next week, well, yeah, let's wait and see. I think we're talking a considerable period of time yet before we get anything like back to so-called normal, which will be new normal. So, let's use this time productively. Yes, to deal with the surge of activity that's going to happen as soon as we're allowed to get people around properties and so on. We've got to manage that. But then let's really make sure that we're putting in place a level of service to deal with the CX 4.0 age. And therefore, the key thing is this: make sure you use this time to reimagine how your future business can look like. Because let's be blunt here, David. The state agency prior to COVID was not in a good place. The margins were being eroded. Cash flows were really poor. The length of time it's taking transactions to complete was just getting longer and longer and longer. The take home for owners and the take home for people working for agents is less than it used to be. Our industry was not in a healthy place. There are exceptions, of course, but on the whole, it wasn't. So this is a great opportunity, I feel, great opportunity to reimagine it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but reimagine it and make sure that you come back in rude health and really able to take advantage of the new environment that we're going to be in.
Super stuff. Peter, thank you so much. Genuinely, again, it's been absolutely fantastic. I hope you guys in the room have enjoyed as much as I have. I've followed Peter around, not literally, by the way, in my property career. Absolutely fantastic advice there. For you guys that are in the room that have posed questions, what I'm going to do, obviously, because I'm just a little bit wary on time now, I've got a couple of little bits to show you before we go. I'll get them questions answered for you guys at the end of the presentation. Or if you do have to leave, what I will do is I'll send you an email by the close of play tonight.